Welcome to the Jewish month of Nissan. Nissan, which has in its root the word Nes, it's a time of many, many miracles, is probably the foundation stone of the entire Jewish people. One of the major mitzvahs of the Torah that we spoke about earlier, the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, was said concerning the month of Nissan. HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. This month should be for you Rosh Chodeshim, the beginning of all the months, which makes for a little Jewish time quirk in that even though we count the years from the month of Tishrei, the months we count from the month of Nissan. Nissan is the first month of the Jewish people because that's the month in which we became a people. Now, interestingly enough, we spoke about the fact that it always has to come out in the spring because we always want this festival which falls out in the month of Nissan, the festival of Pesach. We always want this festival to fall out in the springtime just like it was in yesteryear. This, however, is probably the event in all of Jewish history which made us a people. I mean, if you think about it, aside from the Seder, which we have on every Pesach night, and to the best of my knowledge, there isn't a Jew, an affiliated Jew in the entire Jewish world who does not have a Seder, one, in Eretz Yisrael, if you're living in the land of Israel, and two, if you're living in Chutz La'aretz, outside of the land of Israel. Two Sedarim, or one Seder, we have every single year. Anyone who's affiliated with Judaism, we all keep the Seder. But outside of the Seder, the act of coming out of Egypt is reminded to us many, many times throughout the Jewish year. Every morning and every evening, when we say the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema, we accept the yoke of heaven by saying, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. One of the things that we mention in that mitzvah is that the children of Israel came out of Egypt. In addition to that, every Shabbos and every Yom Tov, when we say Kiddush, we always remind ourselves, Zecher liYetziat Mitzrayim. We have to remind ourselves that we came out of Egypt and that we're making a Kiddush to remind ourselves that we came out of Egypt. What is this all about? Now, before we get into the story, a little bit of the details. When we're dealing with the festival of Pesach, there are two main things that we have to prepare for in these days until such time as our holy temple in Jerusalem is rebuilt. They are, first and foremost, before Passover comes, we have to make sure there is no leaven in our house. This is one of the lo ta'aseh, the forbidden things that the Torah tells us about, is that during the festival of Pesach, we should not own or we should not have in our possession, and certainly we shouldn't eat anything which is a leavened product. Now, what's a leavened product, you might ask? Well, a leavened product is either flour or grains, one of the 5 types of grains. That is wheat, barley, spelt, oatmeal, and rye. The 5 types of grains, if any of them come in contact with water and then they're left to their own devices for an extended period of time, they become leaven. They become forbidden, we said, both to have in your possession or to eat on Pesach. These are the things that are right out. However, in addition to that, there's also a mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach night. The unleavened bread, you know, those wonderful Jewish breads that taste like cardboard that we all love. Wonderful, wonderful thing. It's my minhag at my house that every year, my family custom is every year I get everybody together and we bake these matzahs together. One of my neighbors has a bakery. We use the bakery in order to make matzahs. It's delicious, it's great, and it's a hands-on thing to do with your kids. In any case, these are the 2 major mitzvahs that we have concerning Pesach. In addition, on Pesach night, we eat the maror, the bitter herbs. Many Jews use for this a romaine lettuce leaves specifically, or we also have what's called chrein. You have the spicy root that we use as well. All of these things are done on Pesach night. These are the minhagim that we have. When the mikdash will be rebuilt speedily in our times, God willing, then we will also bring a sacrifice, the korban Pesach, this paschal lamb as it's called. These are the things which pertain to Pesach. But what was Pesach really about? When you take a look at Pesach, we find that it was a tremendous, tremendous story. I mean, think about it. Where did it take place? This story took place in Egypt of yesteryear. Egypt of yesteryear was the superpower of its time. They were the technological and cultural and most importantly military superpower of their time. Egypt is the source where horses come from. They were the first to build chariots, and they had tremendous armies which utilized these in a tremendous way to conquer other nations. Egypt was the superpower of the time. And yet, despite their superpower, we find that over the period of 1 year's time, they were brought to their knees by miracles, outright miracles, for the sake of the Jewish people. Let's give a little detail into the story so you know how to tell it over to your children. Now, if you think about it, as much as the might of Egypt grew, the Jewish people, the Torah tells us, grew exponentially as well. Think about it for a minute. The Jews came down to the land of Egypt. They totaled 70 people only. That was it. Yaakov, Jacob, and his sons and his grandchildren, there were 70 Jews in total in the entire world. 210 years later, when the Jewish people left, among the many things that they did is they counted the amount of Jewish males above the age of 20. The Torah tells us there were over 600,000 Jewish males above the age of 20. Now, if we're going to assume that there was at least an equal number of Jewish women above the age of 20 as well, that's already 1,200,000 people. And if we're going to include all of the children under the age of 20, both males and females, let's assume that's another 600,000. What we're going to find is that 1,800,000 Jews came out of Egypt after only 210 years. Now, this is a phenomenal thing. In all of recorded history, there has never been a people that have grown exponentially like this. And the truth of the matter is that when you think about it, the Jewish people, during the time of slavery, lost untold thousands of people to the slavery itself. They died due to the hardships of the slavery. And yet, despite the hardships of the slavery, which whittled away at us, and despite the fact, our sages say, that only 20% of the entire Jewish population, that 1,800,000 Jews, was only 20% of the Jewish population that came out of Egypt. Despite that fact, we grew beyond the expectations of anybody. No one could have seen how great we were going to grow. So this was clearly, the Jewish growth was a miracle during the period of during the period of Egypt. However, what happened was, because we were growing at such a great rate, the Egyptians became afraid. The Torah tells us that they were worried that we were going to fill up the entire land and basically boot them out, which was not something that we ever intended to do. However, because of that fear, they started to subjugate the Jewish people. Now, the subjugation that they did, the slavery that they did, really was done in a way to break the Jewish people. They wanted to break us physically, they wanted to break us spiritually, and they wanted to break us morally if they could as well. They tried everything within their power. For example, the Torah tells us that we were forced to build two major strongholds, one called Pitom and the other one called Ramses. Now, what are these names? What do they mean? Our sages say Pitom was called Pitom because it was built over a sinkhole. And basically, what would happen is when they would build something over the sinkhole, whatever they built would sink into the ground. And the next day they would come back, and everything that they had built was gone because it sunk into the ground. Ramses, say our sages, is a composite word. It's made out of the word Ram-Mases. Ram-Mases means it was raised and fell. What does that mean? It means that the place where the city was built was impossible to make a foundation on. And because a foundation couldn't be made, whatever they built during the day, it rose up and fell down during the night. And they would come back in the morning and they would find that all their work from yesterday was worth nothing. They had to start from scratch again. So basically, we see that although the work was totally purposeless, they really didn't gain anything from it. The Egyptians did that because they wanted to break the Jews both physically and spiritually. Eventually, after 209 years, the Jews had had enough. They called out to God. They called out to the God of their fathers, and Hashem heard their voice. God heard their voice and sent them Moshe, our teacher. Now, in sending them Moshe, our teacher, we're going to beat around the burning bush because of lack of time. In sending Moshe, our teacher, he comes. He convinces the Jewish people by means of a special code word that he is the prophesied Messiah of the Jewish people to take them out of bondage. And he therefore goes immediately to visit Pharaoh. Now, if you think about that, that's crazy. I mean, who in their right mind would walk up to the door of the White House? Come, let me in now. I'm here to speak to the president. Who's going to let him in? If you want to speak to the Queen of England or the Prime Minister of England or even the Prime Minister of Israel, and you just walk up to the door, who's in their right mind is going to let you in? Moshe, who knows Moshe? But despite that fact, Moses walks up to the door, and he walks right in. Our sages tell us that there were wild animals that were guarding the palace of Paro. And when Moshe came close, they were sicked upon him. And Moshe, as soon as he saw them, said, "You behind me, you over here." All of the animals came and they started following him docilely into the throne room of Pharaoh. Now Moses walks into the throne room, and he's standing in front of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is kind of quaking in his boots because he sees all the animals standing behind Moshe. But he says, "Yes, what do you want?" And Moshe says the famous statement, "Let my people go. We need to go 3 days into the desert in order to worship the God of our fathers." Paro says, "Why should I let you go?" And Moshe does the famous miracle of throwing his staff on the floor, and it becomes a snake. Now Paro, when he saw that, said to Moses, "Moses, you're bringing magic into a place where the entire place is magic." And he called over his magicians and he says, "You can do that, right?" And they immediately throw down their staffs, they whisper a couple of words, and their staffs also turn into snakes. What does Moshe do? He picks up his snake by its tail, and it becomes a staff again. Then what does he do? He takes it, throws it down again, and lo and behold, yes, I said lo and behold, it stays a staff. But after it stays a staff, it starts slithering on the floor like a snake, and it goes and it eats up all of the other snakes. That was a miracle unto itself, and it was a portent for what was to come. But Paro didn't get the message. They send him away. Moshe comes back again, and the 10 plagues of Egypt start. Boom, boom, boom. Over a 10-month period of time, 1 plague per month. Yes, they weren't back to back. 1 plague per month, the plagues take place. There was a period where Paro was warned, this is what was going to be, this plague is going to come. He didn't listen to the warning. The plague came. It was there for a week's time. And then afterwards, they were given a week to recover from the entire procedure. That's how it went for 10 months until the last of the 10 plagues. Boom, boom, boom. Now, a question is asked, why do we need this? Why did we need this whole procedure? I mean, at the end of the day, God has it within his power that when Moshe had met with Pharaoh the first time, he could have said, "Paro, come over here," threw him down on the ground, stepped on his neck and said, "We're leaving, right?" And Paro would say, yes, you're leaving. Why didn't they do that? Why go through the whole procedure of 10 plagues decimating the land of Egypt in order to get out the Jewish people? Why not do it quickly? So the truth is that the Torah asked this question itself, and it tells us that it was needed for the sake of the Jewish people. This is a verse in Exodus, the book of Shmot, chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. It says as follows, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem, God tells Moshe, Bo el Paro, come unto Paro. Ki ani ichbati et libo ve'et lev avadav. I have made his heart and the heart of his servants heavy. Laman shiti ototai ele bikirbo, because I want you to witness these signs. V'laman tesaper be'oznei bincha u'ben bidcha et asher hit'alalti b'Mitzrayim. I want you to tell your children and your children's children how I totally played with and destroyed the land of Israel, the land of Egypt. Ve'ototai asher samti bam. And I want you to describe to them in detail the signs that I showed it to you. V'yadatem ki ani Adonai, and you should know that I am God. This verse tells us that there are 2 main reasons why we needed as a people these 10 plagues. Reason number 1, the basic reason is so that we have a clear understanding who it is we're talking with. Who it is, the God of Avram, who it is, the God of Yitzchak, who it is, the God of Jacob, our forefathers. Elokei Yisrael, the God of Israel. Who it is, what is his ability, what he can do, what is not within his grasp. That's point A. Point B was because we need to be able to relate to our children and our children's children what we witnessed with our own eyes as a people in the land of Egypt. Now there's a famous book called the Kuzari, at least in the religious circles, the book of the Kuzari. And it's famous because it was the first book of comparative religion in existence. It was written by a fellow named Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, one of our Rishonim. And in it he describes the journey of the king of the Khazars through religions in order to come to the conclusion of what religion held the truth. Now, interestingly enough, when he first met the rabbi, when the king of the Khazars first met the rabbi of the book, with whom he had his philosophical discussions, he asked him, what do you believe in? And the rabbi that he met, called the Chaver in the book, he tells him, I believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who took us out of Egypt. And the king of the Khazars hears that, he goes, that's a God? That's like a pocket God. What do you mean? What type of God is that? If you want to tell me you believe in a God, tell me I believe in the God that created the universe. Tell me I believe in the God that's all-powerful, super-duper, wonderful, great. He's the God. That's the one you believe in. You're going to tell me about this little God. He did you a favor. What's the point? And the rabbi told him the following. He said, listen, anybody could say that they believe in the God who created the heavens and the earth. Anybody can say that. But the truth is, when that God comes and he does something for you, and he does it openly, he does it in front of thousands and millions of people, then you know that he's there. Then you know who you're trusting. And that's why we mention all the time the issue of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the coming out of Egypt. The coming out of Egypt was a turning point for us as the Jewish nation. Without that, we would not have come to appreciate what we have. And let me go on to explain what it is that I mean. We needed, as a Jewish people, to be subjugated. We had to go through the slavery process. It was part punishment and part necessary in order to give us the proper foundation as a people. Why is that? So let me give a parable to explain. When I was serving in the IDF, in the Israeli Defense Forces, I was a gung-ho soldier, and due to various reasons, I was in a unit which did not, unfortunately, do that much militarily. I was sitting around all day looking for things to do. If I was on Shmira, if I was on guard duty, I was staring out into the blackness, and as important as it was, as necessary as it was, as a person standing there for 8 hours at a time, sometimes 10 and 12 hours at a time, you're just wondering what I'm doing with your life. You're looking around, you're listening for an enemy that might come, but you feel the time ticking away. And you say to yourself, what am I doing with my life? And what happened was, after my army service, I came out and I went to yeshiva, and I said, I have 2 more years that I'm supposed to stay in yeshiva. I am going to spend those 2 years and I'm going to apply myself as best as I can. Well, you know what? It's due to those 2 years in yeshiva that I became the person that I am today. Because I applied myself for the first time in my life. Because I felt that my time was important. And I felt that my life had meaning. Now it was the time to apply myself. And when I applied myself, then I became who I could possibly become. The same was true with the Jewish people. Because we were the slaves of Egypt, because we felt that we had no time, because we felt that our bodies weren't our time wasn't our own, and worse than that, everything that we were doing had no purpose whatsoever. The buildings we would build would fall down. Everything was purposeless, it was meaningless. We were ready, we were waiting for purpose in life. And therefore, when Moshe came, when our teacher Moses came, when God took us out of Egypt with his mighty arm, with signs and wonders which were clear for him and for us and for the entire world, then we said to himself, we know what we're getting, we know where we're going, we're ready to accept upon ourselves Torah and mitzvahs. And when we come across this time of the year, when Nissan comes along and we begin our preparations for Pesach and the Seder night, which is really the fulcrum of the entire Pesach festival, when we get ready for the Pesach night, that's what we have to have in mind. We have to realize what happened in Egypt. We have to feel it, not just say it. We have to know what it was so that we can then tell ourselves and our children what it was to be a Jew in Egypt and how God himself came and took us out to make us the nation that we are today. We were seekers of meaning in life. We wanted meaning, and the second that God came along and gave it to us, we accepted it with open arms, with love and with joy. That is what the entire festival of Pesach is about. That's what we have to relate on the Seder night. So my blessing to you is that we have a Chag Kasher V'Samech. You should have a happy and a joyous festival of Pesach with you and your family. And God willing, together, you should come across this realization and this feeling of we have a God who looks out for us. We're the Jewish people, and we are God's blessed nation among all of the nations of the world. Thank you very much.